As times change, audiences change, the creature, the monster, the villain, I think is allowed to evolve.
The social thriller film is in, and it's reinventing the horror genre as we know it.
Now you're in the sunken place.
In 2017, Jordan Peele's smash hit Get Out not only generated an endless stream of think pieces and dialogue about enduring racism in our nation,
White family? Black servants?
it also ignited a cinematic craze of socially minded horror films, which have even come to be seen as a genre of their own.
I call it a social thriller.
The trademark of the social thriller is that it devises its scares around hot-button, politically charged issues that make us uneasy.
Every year, these liberal elites, the globalist cucks who run the deep state, kidnap a bunch of normal folks like us and hunt us for f***ing sport.
Horror movies have always found new ways to crawl under our skin, routinely reinventing themselves to maintain a grip on viewers.
Maybe it's some kind of evil being that can read our minds and take the shape of stuff we're afraid of.
So what exactly scares us? You may look to common phobias like spiders, clowns, and ghosts.
What are you afraid of, a little blood?
But according to research, these menaces hold a rather low stake in our minds. Our true greatest fear is humanity and its capacity for evil.
There is evil in this world. There's dark, awful things.
And likewise, man-made perils like war, terrorism, or simply society itself can give rise to terrifying cinema and TV.
There are far worse things awaiting man than death.
If we look closer, horror films have always been full of social insight, inherently loaded with the subtext of our shared traumas, fears, and unrest.
This is no dream, this is really happening!
So what exactly is the social thriller, and how does it provoke our collective anxieties in a new way? Here's our take on modern social horror and how it follows from the evolution of the horror genre through the ages.
What are you people? We're Americans.
You're watching
The Take.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to share and subscribe.
This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. Horror movies provide a safe space for us to face our fears. After all, we can tell ourselves that it's just a movie. But social thrillers are crafted to remind us that the true terrors are waiting for us once we leave the dark cinema and re-enter civilization.
She wasn't a reflection. She was real.
While the term social thriller has popped up in individual film reviews and criticism since at least the 1970s, it wasn't generally used to connote a distinct, cohesive genre. Then, in 2017, Jordan Peele coined this label in its modern incarnation, defining the social thriller as, quote, thriller/horror movies where the ultimate villain is society.
There's something wrong with the world, isn't there, Maya?
There is something wrong, Selena.
As Peele has put it, it's about the notion that to find the scariest monster, we need to look no further than the human demon. And when I talk about the human demon, I'm talking about the evil we're capable of collectively. For Get Out, Peele found inspiration in a variety of precursors to the modern social thriller, like 1968's Rosemary's Baby, which tackles issues of female disempowerment and control over their bodies.
I didn't want to miss baby night.
You...
And a couple of my nails were ragged and...
After protagonist Rosemary is raped by Satan himself, her pregnancy is medicated and managed by hostile, controlling men.
Don't read books. No pregnancy was ever exactly like the ones described in the books.
Rosemary's own body becomes an enemy, while all decisions about what to do with it are taken away from her. So the film dramatizes its time period's historic battle for women's rights, as well as male fears of female agency.
Just be a mother to your baby.
These themes of control over women and their bodies also play out in another movie based on an Ira Levin novel, 1975's The Stepford Wives, set in a dystopian suburb where the women are suspiciously subservient to their husbands.
I want to please him now.
When it's revealed that the housewives are actually cyborgs programmed by the Men's Association, this analogy for women being brainwashed by the patriarchy offers a concise feminist critique of old-fashioned gender roles.
I like to watch women doing little domestic chores.
Other prominent social thrillers have focused on racial tensions. In 1968's Night of the Living Dead, released at the end of the Civil Rights Movement, African-American protagonist Ben is trapped in a house with unequipped white people who must reluctantly rely on him to survive.
I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But we have to try to board the house up together.
While director George Romero said his film wasn't consciously intended as a racial critique, critics have read Ben's preparedness to take on the zombies as a product of having faced the horrors of racism his entire life.
Don't you know what's going on out there? This is no Sunday school picnic.
In 1992's Candyman, the film's Black Boogeyman is the ghost of a former slave who was murdered for impregnating a white woman.
Father executed a terrible revenge. Poor Candyman.
We never learn his real name, nor are we asked to sympathize with him. So the film highlights America's ugly history of demonizing black men like Candyman against a backdrop of urban plight and the housing projects he haunts.
You know, whites don't ever come here except to cause us a problem.
One quality that distinguishes a good social thriller is that it reveals multi-layered and complex feelings around political topics that so often get reduced to simple us or them party lines in public discourse. Get Out wouldn't be a very interesting movie if its message were simply that people are racist or racists are bad. Instead, the plot is looking more specifically at self-congratulatory liberal types who think of themselves as inclusive and progressive.
I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could.
But who, when it comes down to it, are determined to preserve the status quo that keeps them on top. The result is a cinematic experience that confronts us with how much more pervasive racism is than we generally like to think.
I do not like the deer. I'm sick of it. They're taking over. They're like rats. They're destroying the ecosystem.
And it makes viewers uncomfortable by forcing them to question their own complicated, repressed racial allegiances.
Get him, Grandpa.
The horror genre's convention of symbolically evocative monsters is especially effective at bringing out the full, messy, complicated spectrum of our unease about social questions that are in reality anything but simple.
White black people.
Who knows?
Since Peele popularized the social thriller, critics have eagerly applied the term to a wide range of new films that tackle complex problems like race, class, oppression, and sexuality or gender, as well as retroactively to past classics. A number of prominent films to be grouped in this category, like Boots Riley's Sorry to Bother You, and 2020 Oscar winner Parasite, merely have horrific elements, and the term has even been extended to examples far outside of the horror genre. When Peele curated his BAM film series, The Art of the Social Thriller, he also included Joe Dante's more comedic The Burbs, Hitchcock classic Rear Window, and even 1967 comedy drama Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, about an interracial couple meeting their soon-to-be in-laws, because he views his own Get Out as sort of a thriller take on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Mom and Dad, my black boyfriend will be coming up this weekend, and I just don't want you to be shocked.
Still, some have questioned the craze for applying the social thriller label to any vaguely horrific movie with something to say, or any horror movie that's especially good. Critics argue that the category, like the related elevated horror label that's been thrown around lately, plays into a long history of the horror genre being critically ignored and dismissed as not serious. As Emma Fraser wrote for Sci-Fi, social thriller is essentially a fancy way of talking about a specific kind of horror. But by dressing this genre up, it actually does it a disservice. Horror is much smarter than it is often given credit for. In fact, arguably, many of the best horror films throughout history could qualify as social thrillers, as they so often symbolically express our shared cultural anxieties as literal monsters. In order to understand why this socially conscious breed of horror is thriving today, it's helpful to look back at the evolution of horror in cinema over the course of US history.
These movies are too real sometimes.
The question of what scares people offers a glimpse into the social consciousness, angsts, and unrests of a particular era. So how have our shifting anxieties over the decades translated into American film? Back in the 1930s, as the optimism of the roaring 20s was washed away by the Great Depression, horror films saw the rise of the mad scientist, whose once promising marvels had gone terribly awry and created something awful.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
30s classics The Invisible Man and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde both capture the period's pervasive feeling that American dreams had turned to American nightmares through stories of scientific experiments with costly consequences.
You're in the power of this monster that you've created. Never take that drug again.
But no other film provided as poignant social commentary on losing faith in the powers of progress as 1931 creature feature Frankenstein.
What changes a darkness into light?
When Dr. Frankenstein's meddling backfires, he struggles to undo the monstrosity he created.
Pull yourself together. What can we do?
Reflecting how people felt powerless to put things back in order. But it's Frankenstein's monster who is the true proletarian symbol of the period's anguish. From his work clothes to his asphalt spreader boots, he represents the legions of abandoned American laborers. 50s films expressed anxieties about the potentially world-ending weapons unleashed by World War II and the specter of nuclear attack which haunted the Cold War.
For this will decide the fate of civilization, all humanity. Whether we live or die may depend on what happens here.
These fears manifested in monster movies about civilization being decimated by a force too big to be contained, like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
She's on a rampage. We've got to warn the town.
She's grown into a giant!
Never mind, get into the car.
Or the tremendously popular Japanese monster movie Godzilla, which can also be viewed as a response to the decimation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The giant arachnids in Tarantula are the result of radiation mutation and must be defeated with napalm, an incendiary weapon used in the Second World War.
Dropping napalm. Follow an order.
In the 1953 H.G. Wells adaptation, The War of the Worlds, the U.S. government resorts to dropping an atomic bomb on Martians invading California, but the aliens' force fields prove impervious to the bomb's power. So this provided American audiences a terrifying glimpse of what could have been if the bomb had failed to end World War II.
If the A-bomb fails, that is, the Martians can conquer the Earth in 6 days.
Starting in the 60s and peaking in the 80s, an upswing in violent crime, a rise in American serial killers, and hysteria driving many people out of big cities and into the suburbs spawned the slasher film genre.
Come to Freddy.
Many classic slasher films based their villains on real-life serial killers, like Ed Gein, who inspired the killers of 1960s Psycho.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
And 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Marketing that reminded viewers some of these films were based on true events.
What happened was true.
Evoked the close-to-home terror of these unthinkable crimes.
This is the movie that is just as real, just as terrifying as being there.
Today's social thriller label tends to be used both by critics and Peele himself, mostly for progressive or inclusive films. But there are plenty of social horror movements in history that can also express more conservative or reactionary views of the world. In slasher films, there was an implied morality punishing premarital sex and drug use, which were often precursors to a character's departure, while a pure final girl managed to survive.
There's nothing to be scared of. I killed him.
These conventions can be seen as a condemnation of the time period's youthful experimentation with sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. You can never have sex. You can never drink or do drugs.
Horror movies that responded to the AIDS epidemic of the 80s and 90s likewise could express both progressive and conservative sentiments about the crisis. In Fright Night, The Lost Boys, and From Dusk Till Dawn, vampires came to stand in for the risk of infection.
It's too late, but blood is in your veins.
Implicitly demonizing carriers of the virus.
Dinner is served.
On the other end of the spectrum, Alien 3 shows sympathy for the victims of the virus, the stigmatized colony of men Ripley lands among who are separated from society due to a genetic mutation.
We've 25 prisoners in this facility. All double white chromos.
Can be read as a proxy for the leagues of HIV-positive men who were ostracized from the world.
Just because they've taken on religion doesn't make them any less dangerous.
1993 thriller Daybreak also called out the government's inadequate response to the AIDS epidemic and criticized the social persecution of HIV-positive men through a story where infected people are tattooed with the letter P to indicate their positive status.
They lock these people up. They don't give them medicine.
More broadly, the resurrection of horror movie conventions like tainted blood and body horror reflected visceral fears of this unknown virus that could be invisibly lurking within oneself. Fast forward to the terrorist attacks of September 11th, and major shifts in American culture and politics manifested in the ascendancy of horror subgenres like found footage, Clash of Civilizations, and home invasion. Echoing the feel of 9/11 news coverage, found footage films attempt to contain an experience.
I'm just gonna keep rolling. I hope that I get as much as possible.
Only for the characters to frequently become trapped and fall victim to it.
You still filming?
Yeah. People are gonna want to know how it all went down.
The Clash of Civilizations subgenre capitalized on the rampant xenophobia that consumed America in the wake of 9/11, frequently depicting non-Americans as barbaric antagonists belonging to an ancient society that knows no bounds of evil.
I want a heart. The heart of some arrogant gringo tourist.
Home invasion films reflected that after this attack on their home soil, Americans now felt unsafe in their own sanctuaries. In movies like You're Next and Funny Games, intruders with eerily unknowable motives torture families in their own homes.
Why are you doing this? Why not?
And in 2008's The Strangers, protagonist Kristen also begs the question of why, just like the millions of Americans struggling to understand the violence of 9/11. Kristen's assailants callously respond,
"'Cause you were home."
Reminding us that no person or place is ever safe from acts of terror.
We gotta get out of here. It's not safe here.
While the moral code of slasher films gave people the illusion of control over their fates amidst their time period's hysteria, in this senseless new age, there was nothing you could do to protect yourself from danger.
Anyone could be next. Nobody's safe.
While it's clear that horror movies have been commenting insightfully on society since the dawn of their existence, social thrillers with something to say about today's world are particularly successful and appealing to audiences. Why is that? Today, we're plugged into a constant stream of information, making our emotions volatile and easily manipulated. As filmmaker Jen Sanko put it to Rolling Stone, all of these emotions, especially fear, whip people up into a state of alarm and they become angry and almost evangelical about what they believe. Even though violent crime is down and life expectancy is up, people today feel increasingly unsafe.
The vast majority of Americans today do not feel safe.
Leading sociologist Barry Glassner remarked that we are living in the most fear-mongering time in human history.
It used to be that people waited for the evening newscast or for the morning newspaper to get their dose of fear. Now they get it on their phones constantly.
Some modern social horrors employ social media terror to reflect our anxieties about an increasingly digital existence and threats to cybersecurity.
Guys, it's definitely a hacker.
Other films and shows reflect that much of our nation's fear is stoked by today's tumultuous and divisive social climate.
Our country is going to hell.
In the 2017 season of American Horror Story, titled Cult, the explosive Kai represents the right, while volatile Allie portrays the left, and the season focuses heavily on mob mentalities.
Are we a cult? I thought we were a political movement.
All politics is a personality cult.
Chapman University's 2016 survey of Americans exposed the country's greatest fear as corrupt government officials.
Even at the highest levels of the U.S. government, including Congress, there are recent examples of corrupt practices that are taking place.
An enduring, increasingly validated fear, which has been mirrored in horror narratives centered on an evil, backstabbing government like the Purge series.
The new founding fathers had been using the Purge to help their own economic agenda.
2016's entry, Election Year, reflects that the self-serving actions of politicians directly endanger and harm the lives of people they've sworn to serve.
For the past 20 years, the NFFA has taken a legalized murder to decrease the poor population.
which in turn keeps the government spending down.
And this public outrage is on display once again in the fourth film, The First Purge, which features an anti-purge operation bearing a striking resemblance to the Black Lives Matter movement. So while the government fought alongside civilians in monster movies of the 40s and 50s, many of today's horror movies reflect public sentiment that the government is decidedly against us.
Our neighborhood is under siege, gentlemen, from a government who doesn't give a shit about any of us.
Peele's Get Out gives voice to the horrors of racism and the particular ways it's expressed in our day and age.
What I wanted to point out with this film is that it's connected to the deep horror of racism.
The story's twist that the Armitage family is stealing the bodies of healthy young black people as hosts for their relatives' aging brains is a metaphor for the disenfranchisement of African Americans.
I'll control the motor function, so I'll be me.
Similar to the symbolic point that Stepford Wives made for women in the 70s. The sunken place protagonist Chris is cast into visualizes the lesser, subjugated existence that modern systemic racism continues to impose on black people.
Your existence will be as a passenger. You'll live in the sunken place.
Yet even before these symbolic plot points develop, the film realistically portrays enduring problems like cultural appropriation.
People want to be stronger, faster, cooler.
Black is in fashion.
And the tendencies of the people Chris meets to minimize him and acknowledge his blackness before his personhood.
Do you find being African American has more advantage or disadvantage in the modern world?
Peele's 2019 social thriller, Us, shifts its focus from race to class, looking darkly at how our inherited socioeconomic status predetermines our lives, and how inequality has grown into a monster that threatens to destroy us all.
We abandoned the tethered. They all went mad down here.
2020's The Hunt also presents a class war, but where the liberal elites hunt those they refer to as deplorables, who are selected for not being PC enough.
Okay, this is Gary. He's got a podcast called The Confederate Files.
I vote in.
In. Is that a kimono? That's appropriation.
So while most modern class critiques implicitly endorse progressive values, The Hunt can be read as a cautionary tale of the dangers of the left's cancel culture and the toxicity that can radiate within political echo chambers on either side.
We need to lean in to the stereotype,
Correct.
to let them just expose their biases.
Yeah, or we could just shoot them as soon as they grab their guns.
The 2020 remake of The Invisible Man tackles toxic masculinity with pathologically abusive Adrian, who continues to torment his wife Cecilia even after he's apparently died. Cecilia's unheard cries for help echo the Me Too movement, which urges us to believe women.
He's doing this to me. Adrian, you need some medication.
2018's Unsane likewise focuses on a culture that labels women as crazy instead of listening to them.
It's him! It's him! I'm telling you, it's Shrine! No, listen! I'm not f***ing crazy!
So if we've gleaned anything from the popularity of these films, it's that having something insightful to say about our world has become a mainstay of today's most acclaimed horror. So what will tomorrow's horror movies look like? No doubt the array of emotions and changes to human society unleashed by 2020's coronavirus pandemic will be processed through themes of isolation, social collapse, and, of course, the fear of infection. But whatever their focus, as the social horror has taught us time and again, if there's one thing we're afraid of,
It's us.
God created the heavens and the earth. It is man's prerogative and woman's to create their own particular and private hell.
If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notified about all our new videos. This video is brought to you by Mubi, a streaming service we love. Mubi is a treasure trove of films. Every day, Mubi premieres a new film. Whether it's a movie you've been dying to see or one you've never heard of before, there is always something new to discover. So in this world where it's very easy to spend hours debating what you should watch, Mubi is like having a really cool friend with amazing taste in movies, making it so much easier for you. They feature hard-to-come-by masterpieces, indie festival darlings, influential art house and foreign films, lesser-known films by your favorite famous directors, and more. Plus, you can even download the films to watch offline, and there are no ads, ever. This month, in partnership with New York's Museum of the Moving Image, Mubi will exclusively premiere films from the First Look Festival, the museum's annual showcase of new, innovative international cinema. The selection includes Noof Noof, an intimate, empathic portrait of a barber in Madagascar. We can't recommend Mubi highly enough. You can try it out now for free for a whole month. Just click the link in the description below.